Hello, folks. Well, we've come to the end of our study of the letter of Ephesians, haven't we? As we wrap up this study, I want to talk about Ephesians chapter 6, verses 18 through 24. And from this text, I want us to talk about what impresses me about Paul in this passage. I wish I could hear from you about what impresses you about him. But if you don't mind, I want to share with you just a few thoughts. Of course, my motive is to hold Paul up as an example worthy of our imitation. First, let's take a look at verses 19 through 20. Here they are. Pray also for me, Paul writes, so that when I speak, a message may be given to me to make known with boldness the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains. Pray that I may declare it boldly as I must speak. One thing about this text that impresses me about Paul is that living under house arrest in Rome, Paul felt his need of his friends' prayers. And he requests those prayers not so much for his own well-being as for the cause of the gospel to which his life was completely devoted. His request was for the advancement of the gospel, not for his own benefit. I think this text should encourage each one of us to be more intentional about making Christ and the gospel known to the people around us. Our intent and prayer should be the same as Paul's, don't you think? Paul felt a necessity to communicate the gospel to others, and he set his mind on doing so. We should do the same. It's interesting to me that Paul calls himself a prisoner, but I'm thinking about the soldier to whom Paul may have been chained, and I'm wondering who the real prisoner was. Which of the two was a prisoner? Paul thinks of himself as an ambassador of Jesus Christ, duly appointed to represent his Lord at the imperial court of Rome. And shouldn't we also see ourselves as representing our Lord at home, at work, among our neighbors and friends, and wherever we are? So that's something that impresses me about Paul. That is his concern for the spread of the gospel, even more than his own well-being. But another thing that impresses me in this passage about Paul is found in verses 21 and 22. Tychicus is the one who will carry this letter to Paul's readers, and he is also the one who carried the letter to the Colossian Christians. And I want you to notice what Paul writes in verses 21 and 22. Here is what he says, so that you also may know how I am doing and what I am doing, Tychicus will tell you everything. He is a dear brother and a faithful minister in the Lord, and I am sending him to you for this very purpose, to let you know how we are and to encourage your hearts. Paul tells us in that passage that Tychicus will give the Asian Christians all the apostles' news and strengthen and encourage their hearts. Interestingly, verse 22 gives us insight into the purpose of the letter. Ephesians is a letter of encouragement. It was intended to encourage. And Paul, in prison, rather than seeking encouragement for himself, gives it. And no doubt, he gives it to Tychicus when he writes of him that he is a beloved brother and a faithful minister in the Lord. My point here is that Paul is always concerned about the spiritual health of the churches and of the Christians around him. We might say his concern for his children in the faith as well. So he writes them a letter to encourage them. And to apply this point, what system do we have in place to spiritually strengthen and encourage those who might be considered under our charge or in our charge? What steps are we taking to encourage new Christians and older Christians? This is a plea for us to look out for one another, to care for each other's spiritual health, and to do what we can to encourage spiritual growth in one another. Well, this brings to a close our study of Ephesians. It's been a great one. Thank you to each of you for your contributions in this study. And I do hope that each one of you will join me in our next study. It will begin on March 15th, my brother Zephy's birthday. Our next study, we will pray through the book of Exodus in the Old Testament. And I want to encourage you to watch here in our Facebook community for more information regarding this new study in the next couple of weeks. We will be making a few small changes for those of you who will do this study using the 3-column method, and I'll share those changes later in a few days. At this point, I don't want you to give much thought to the new study in Exodus. I want you and me to take a little break, and let's celebrate that we finished our study of Ephesians together. It's an accomplishment, and the Lord taught us a lot and encouraged us greatly. So let's take a few moments, a few days to celebrate that victory and that encouragement. I will be communicating with you in a few days, and until then, may God bless you.